And the referee again checking his watch. And there it goes! The final whistle!
Ronald Corazon will wait inside the box for this from Martin Nutt. And a header on it there, and that might have been it. That is a goal for Canada. The header was a Jason DeVos.
One last chance for Canada. Sophie Schmidt takes a deflection. Matheson is down the goal. The wins runs for Canada.
Canada qualified for World Cup '86, defeating Honduras by a score of 2-1 here in St. John's, Newfoundland this afternoon.
Welcome to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. My name is Jason DeVos. I'm the Director of Development with Canada Soccer, and it's been another busy week of news on the Canadian soccer landscape. And joining me now to discuss that is Brad Fougere, Digital and Corporate Communications Manager with Canada Soccer. Brad, been another busy week for you, hasn't it?
Mr. DeVos, it has. It's been a busy week for us all, but exciting news, obviously,
it's
an announcement
exciting,
that we
though.
were all waiting for. It is.
Yes,
it is
for
exciting.
sure.
It's exciting. It's exciting news to have Bev Priestman back. Obviously with Canada Soccer for 5 years. Very exciting that she's now returned to lead the women's national team program. Someone who knows the players, someone who knows the program, obviously someone who knows the country, and exciting to have her here speaking with you today. So looking forward to that for sure.
Yeah, it's an exciting time, and obviously everyone's been waiting with bated breath to see who would succeed Kenneth Heinemuller and carry on the great work that it's been done by him and by John Herdman previously, and obviously now we know that person is Bev Priestman, and really looking forward to the chat we're going to have with her today. On the women's national team front, there's a lot of exciting games coming up on the weekend in Europe. Tell us a little bit about what's transpiring on the professional front for the women in our national team pool.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it comes in an exciting time for Bev. Lots of high level competition for some of our women's national team players. On Saturday, we'll have French Women's League action. Sunday as well, and then Janine Becky will play in an FA Cup final in England, where Bev is on Sunday. So that's an exciting opportunity for Janine Becky with Man City. That was a big move for her, and obviously we've followed her. She's been tearing it up with Man City, and now gets an opportunity to play for an FA Cup final. And then moving on through the week, there's lots of other cup action. So the Conti Cup will take place on the women's side. So we'll see Jessie and Chelsea against Shalina and Tottenham, and then Man City will play on Wednesday. Adriana Leon and West Ham will also play on Wednesday. So yeah, lots of FA Women's Soccer League action coming up. With some of our best women's national team players playing in England.
It's amazing when you look at the level of club football that they're playing, and it's not that many years ago where that just wasn't happening at all. So you look at, the new generation of young players coming through, talking about Jessie Fleming there. You've got Kadisha Buchanan, Ashley Lawrence, Jordan Heidema, Janine Becky, playing for some of the biggest clubs in the women's game in Europe. And that's really exciting for the future of the program for sure. So we'll be sure to get Bev's take on that when we speak to her later on in the episode. On the men's front, on the domestic front specifically, with Major League Soccer continuing, what are you looking forward to most over the weekend?
Yeah, I think we're all keeping an eye on Toronto FC and whether or not they can sort of finish in that supporters shield place, the much begrudged supporters shield position in Major League Soccer. That sounds like they'll actually receive a supporters shield now. So exciting for Toronto to have that opportunity. The Impact and Vancouver will also be in action on Sunday, so be keeping an eye on that. We'd be remiss to not note our friends at Forge FC winning their preliminary competition match.
Congratulations to them.
Yeah, in El Salvador. So they're now in Panama, waiting their November 3rd match, which is next Tuesday, which will be live on TSN3, I believe. Against Panamanian club Tauro FC, who are, a bit of a juggernaut in their own right. So it's sort of a tough match for Forge to have at CONCACAF League level, but they're working their way into a top 6 position in CONCACAF League to try and make the 2021 CONCACAF Champions League. And if they should fail, they'll have a second opportunity, as we know well, in the Canadian Championship final against Toronto FC, which still has not been scheduled, but we'll hopefully have some details on that once the MLS season winds down and once Forge finds their way through the rest of their CONCACAF League schedule.
Yeah, it's exciting times for sure on the domestic front in the professional club football on the men's side. A little bit younger in the grassroots world. Obviously, soccer is continuing. I think a lot of parts of Canada are transitioning to indoor soccer and what that looks like. Obviously, they're managing their way through return to play at various stages of return. And when we come back after the break, we'll have a chat with Dave Nutt, Manager of Development Operations with Canada Soccer, to get an update on club licensing and where we're at with that program, and a little bit of news on that front. So stay tuned after the break. We'll speak to Dave. So we'll see you then. Joined now by Dave Nutt, Manager of Development Operations with Canada Soccer, to give us a little bit of an update on the Canada Soccer Club licensing program. Dave, where are we right now with the program in terms of implementation across the country?
Thanks, Jason, and thanks for having me. I think we're making good progress. We had a recent announcement of a new intake of organizations, so we're up to now 113 clubs across the country who hold licenses in various categories across 7 provinces. So I think we're making really good progress. We also have another group of organizations that are working hard to follow on the heels of that for a next announcement, and I expect we'll be up hopefully north of 150 licensed clubs by the end of 2020, which is a great starting point.
You mentioned there the next announcement. In terms of timelines, what are we looking at? Do you have a specific date, or are you more looking towards a general time of year?
Yeah, it's fluid. It'll be hopefully in Q4, but we're still working out the specifics on that date because it's all based around when we're able to finish all of the reviews and communicate appropriately, as well as obviously a holiday season coming up, and we don't want that announcement to be lost in the shuffle. It's a big moment for the clubs that go through that process and are awarded a license, so we want to be able to announce it at a time that makes sense for them and they're able to promote that and share it, because rightfully so, they're very excited about the work that they've done and the recognition they're going to receive. So we're aiming for towards the end of the year, but that may trickle into the new year depending on when we're able to move things across the finish line. And obviously all that's going on in the world today impacts us as well. If we're not able to complete some of the reviews, or organizations aren't able to follow up on the things that need to be completed in order to complete the licensing program, that impacts us as well.
Yeah. We're in conversation with clubs across the country at every level. You know, the message is coming back loud and clear that this is a really difficult period of time for everyone involved in sport in our country. And, some suggesting even, or asking the question, is this club licensing thing suspended now? Are we not doing this anymore? And so obviously we're being fluid, as you said, and extending deadlines, extending timelines. What can you say to people who are, questioning the difficulties that they're dealing with right now and the value of club licensing? How important is it for them as an organization moving forward? And what approach is Canada Soccer currently taking with those organizations who are in the process?
Yeah, we recognize fully that it's a challenging time for everyone. And with all that's going on in the world and its impacts on the soccer community, we know this may not be front and center for every organization. They may not have the capacity to be able to focus on it. And their attention is rightly so directed towards some things that are a bit more important right now, which are getting kids back on the field and doing it in a safe way. So they may not have the ability to follow through on some of the licensing programs. And we want to be cognizant of that, and we also want to support organizations that are able to move forward. One of our key guiding principles is around being participant-centered, and when we talk about it from a club perspective, we talk about that being the relationship with their players, but we want to live that principle as well. We want to be participant-centered, as in we want to work with the organizations and meet them where they are at that time. So for some organizations, that might be we've got the capacity and we're ready to move this ahead. For others, it might be pushing pause for now until we've gotten through this busy period, the start to our indoor season in some areas, or our regular playing season out on the West Coast, and then meeting them once they've got that progressed to the point that they're able to focus a little bit more on licensing. The importance of setting standards and raising the quality of all our organizations across the country is never going to go away. That's something that we believe in strongly, but the approach has always been collaborative. We want to work with organizations to help them get better, and we need to understand that sometimes organizations just don't have the capacity at that moment to put the work into that area because they've got other priorities. And I think that's been particularly true over the last 6 months, where we've seen organizations that really were very sophisticated, advanced, and pushing along to move towards meeting a really high set of standards, now grinding to a halt and having to focus on completely other things. And we appreciate that. So the program is not suspended. It's still going on. We're still working with clubs through the review process, and we still will have more announcements in the future. But for right now, if there are organizations that aren't able to move forward with things, I would say to them, don't worry, take a breath. We understand, we appreciate what you're going through, and we're here to support you, and we're here to help you either now or when you're ready.
One of the things that we've learned through this process is changing culture and changing what you do and how you do things is really difficult, and it takes time. And we've co-delivered a presentation to clubs in Quebec, and we'll be doing it in the other provinces as well, on culture. And in that presentation, we talk about the fact that culture is not defined by what you say, it is defined by what you do. And the behaviors that you exhibit on a day-to-day basis go a long way towards establishing the culture of the game in your part of the country. And that's unique in every part of the country. In that presentation, you do a really good section on evaluation and the difference between the typical, summative or formative types of evaluation and the developmental evaluation that the club licensing program encompasses. Talk a little bit about the differences between those types of evaluation, if you can.
Yeah, I think in a traditional evaluation, you're looking at evaluating a few things along the way, but really the goal is to arrive at kind of a report card at the end that provides a grade on how organizations have done. And oftentimes the evaluator is external to that process. They're looking at things for the outside to decide whether this is a good organization and whether it isn't. And while that's an important piece of the club licensing program, the idea of learning and developing and growing both as organizations and evaluators is really more where we're coming from, and not necessarily having that removal of the evaluator. The evaluator really is embedded right in the process and has a vested interest in helping those organizations to succeed. Whereas in a traditional evaluation, the evaluator is meant to be impartial and just looking at it from the outside. But as I hope you would agree with me, I think all of us at Canada Soccer and our member associations, the provinces and territories and their districts and regional partners, we've all got a vested interest in helping our organizations to get better. So just standing on the outside and looking at things with a critical eye isn't really the way to be able to help guide those organizations to what we're looking for in terms of their behaviors, in terms of the characteristics that they display, and in terms of the culture of the soccer associations. We really need to get right in there, and we need to understand what's happening. We need to help to provide more guidance, and we need to be fluid about that, because at the end of the day, we're still learning as well. The club licensing program is still new. There's still a lot that we're going to learn from, and we're going to grow. So we're learning as much as evaluators and as governing bodies as those organizations that are going through the process. But I think the key here is behavior change and organizational change is hard, and it takes time, and it's not going to occur overnight. But what we need to start with is a commitment to what we want our structures to look like, the behaviors we want them to exhibit, the characteristics of those systems, and then we need to keep after it and try to drive that behavior change and hold each other accountable. And that was a big part of that culture presentation, because you're right, governing organizations can't set culture because they're not there living it and breathing it every day. It's the organizations that are there interacting with the players, with the parents, and equally important, with each other, that really drives what that culture looks like at the grassroots level. And I think in Canada, through the club licensing program, we've got a really good opportunity to be able to create a culture that is focused on the participant experience. Is it fun? Is it safe? Is it developmentally appropriate? Is it accessible, inclusive, and welcoming? And do we engage with each other as partners to provide a better system rather than competitors, where our goal is to destroy our opponent and win as many games at their expense as we possibly can? Because while that might be success on the field as a system, that's not the success that we're looking for, which is around how many players we get into the game, what their experiences are like, how long they play, whether they're moving on to higher levels of play within the game, whether they're interested in being a part of our system long term as coaches and administrators, who then create the next cycle of culture on top of that. So really changing the focuses of youth soccer is a key piece here, and that helps to drive the culture, because if we measure something different rather than just the result on the field, then we're going to get some different behaviors exhibited there.
Mm-hmm. So it's fair to say that the developmental evaluation process is really intended to support learning and to help the club understand how it can get better, rather than to say to them, this is a snapshot in time, yay or nay, thumbs up, thumbs down. It isn't that. It's really more designed to guide and drive desired behaviors within the soccer community. Talk a little bit, if you can, about how the standards will evolve over time, because we've learned an awful lot over the last 2.5 years about where clubs are and maybe some of the blind spots that we didn't expect to see that have kind of come to the fore, like governance conflicts of loyalty, that type of thing. Talk a little bit how the standards will evolve over time as we learn more and more about the realities of club soccer in our country.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning when talking about developmental evaluation, as evaluators, we're learning along in that process as well. And it's the first time we've done this. So there are going to be things that are blank spots that we miss, things that we didn't realize how important they were or how prevalent they are in the system. Other areas that maybe when we started down this pathway, we thought were key to success. And it turns out maybe they're not nearly as important as what we thought they were early on. And it's always about growing and evolving and getting better. And when we've met those set of standards, then we push on to the next set of standards that need to be there to be able to continue to raise our game. We can't remain static, because if we remain static, then we're never going to be able to meet the demand of people moving forward, which is ever changing. And governance is an important one. And it's one that maybe we early on don't realize we want to focus on as much, because most organizations kind of go through a process where as a soccer club, the first thing they focus on is their on-field programming, as they should, their coaches, their programs and services from that perspective. Once they've got that running relatively smoothly, then they can start to think about some of the administrative supports that need to be there, the budgeting, the finance, the policies, procedures, all of these things that make sure the day-to-day operations are occurring smoothly. And when everything's running relatively well on those areas, then we start to think about governance, which is the role of the board of directors and its relationship with other stakeholders within the club and outside. And one of the areas where we found can create challenges is this idea of conflict of loyalty. So that's when an individual serves multiple roles within the soccer system. So they're on multiple boards of directors where there's an interaction. And the reason that's a challenge is because the requirement of a director is that they make the best decision possible in the best interest of the organization that they're representing. And it's not as easy as taking your hat off and saying, well, in this instance, in this boardroom, I'm representing one organization. And when I walk down the hall into a different boardroom, I'll just represent another. Because sometimes as a board of directors, you've got to make a decision that's in the best interest of that organization that may not be in the best interest of another. And as soon as you start to do that, then you start to let down your fiduciary duties, because you still remain a director in another area. And these are real things. These are things that are outlined in corporate statutes and in not-for-profit acts, and it guides the way organizations need to behave. And it's something I don't think that we realized was as prevalent across the country as what it is, and something that we're working through our guide to governance and some of the good governance workshops that we're presenting to help organizations to better understand, because it is somewhere down the pathway of organizational development before we even start to think about what governance looks like. Because we've got to get our programs and services off the ground, and we've got to get kids through the door. We've got to get coaches to support them. But I think we're at the point now where we need to start to think about some of these things long term, because eventually they are going to prevent us from being able to move forward in the way that we want to and continue to help all of our organizations within the system to get better.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you say in the culture presentation is that we play the role of the critical friend. Explain that a little bit more detail.
Yeah, it's a great saying. And what it means is sometimes we've got to tell you what you need to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear. And the analogy that I give is, sometimes we have to be that friend that says, hey, those shoes and those belts, then that belt, that doesn't match. You don't look as good as you want to be. But we don't do that because we want to call people out and we want to embarrass them and we want to make them look bad. We do it because when we walk out the door with you, we want you to look your best. So the difference between that critical friend role and just being critical is that we do it it from a place of friendship or a place of love because we want you to be the best. So sometimes when we have to hold the mirror up to organizations and say, look, here's some things that we see that you may not see that will help you to get better, it's because we want them to be great. It's not because we want to embarrass them or make them look bad or make them feel as though they're not doing the job that they're meant to do. It's because we want to help them to get better. And it's a delicate role to play because nobody likes to be criticized. But I think when you do it from that place of love or that place of wanting them to be great, it's received a little bit differently. Because I'm telling you, Jason, that you better go change your shoes, because when we go out dancing, I want you to look your best and I want you to make me look good.
Yeah, and no one does it better than you, Dave. You have a way of delivering bad news to people that makes them feel good about themselves. So keep up the great work. It's greatly appreciated by many across the country, I know, from the feedback that I get about the work you're doing in club licensing. And as always, stay safe and look after yourself.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Welcome back to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. Our guest today is likely a familiar name for many of our listeners. From 2013 to 2018, she was a women's national team assistant coach with Canada Soccer and was a member of John Herdman's staff at the 2015 FIFA Women's World Cup in Canada, the 2016 CONCACAF Olympic qualification tournament, and the 2016 Rio Olympic Games, where Canada brought home an unprecedented second consecutive bronze medal. During that time, she also served as Canada Soccer's Women's National Excel Director, overseeing the implementation of the Excel program curriculum from coast to coast. She served as head coach of Canada's under-20 women's national team, as well as head coach of our under-17 women's national team, who qualified for the FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cups in Costa Rica in 2014, in Jordan in 2016, and in Uruguay in 2018. Shortly after qualifying for the Under-17 FIFA Women's World Cup in 2018, she accepted an opportunity to become the senior women's assistant head coach with the English FA, working closely with head coach Phil Neville in delivering all aspects of England's women's national team program. Her 2-year stint with the FA was highlighted by winning the 2019 She Believes Cup in the United States, followed by a 4th place finish at the 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup in France. She is returning to Canada, as she has just been announced as the new head coach of Canada's women's national team. I'm very pleased to welcome to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast, Bev Priestman. Bev, welcome back. You must be excited to get started as the head coach of Canada's senior women's national team.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, it feels like I've never left, to be honest. It's amazing what 2 to 3 years you can fill within that time, but really excited to get going.
Yeah. What attracted you to this role, to lead Canada into next year's Olympics and beyond? What was it about this particular opportunity that really excited you?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think the first one, I definitely, even when I went to the FA, I was very clear that I wanted to be a head coach and a number one. And I think the amazing experiences I've had, I've really missed having that. So I think that's one of the reasons. I think the second thing is, in many ways, it feels like home. You know, I've got a lot of great memories and moments that have happened in that country, met some great people, worked with some great players. And I think, you know, it's a top 10 country. It's a big job. And I think the pressure, the scrutiny, I feel what I've learned about myself is that probably gets the best out of me. So I think all of those things blended together, you know, I think that's why I went for the job.
Yeah. We'll talk about the Olympics next year in a minute, but I want to get your thoughts on your immediate priorities. So the first 90 days in any new job is crucial. What do you focus on first?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing going through my mind is connecting with the people. So the players, the staff, and understand probably, you know, I left 2.5, 3 years ago. You know, I left and then I've gone and done my thing. But there's obviously been a period there where, you know, Canada's evolved, I've evolved. I think understanding where they've been, where they're heading, and then probably to understand where I feel like they need to go. But to do that, I need to listen to those that have lived it for the last two to 3 years, really. So for me, it's probably more connecting with the people, understanding, and then starting to sort of clarify from gathering that information where I feel we need to go short term in the next sort of 9 months towards an Olympic Games, but then start looking as well as what does that look like beyond that period right the way through to 2024.
You mentioned there talking to the players and learning from them, learning from the staff who have been involved in the program. It's the case with every head coach that the support team they have around them is crucially important. Have you already selected or targeted specific individuals to be part of your staff, or is that more of an ongoing learning and evaluation process for you?
Yeah, I think what the benefit with myself is, Jason, obviously I've worked with that great group of staff that are there. I think I definitely need to understand and evaluate. Obviously, I also know what I feel I need around me, having sort of grown over the last 2 to 3 years. I'm clear in terms of what I feel I need around me to get the best out of me. But I'm under no illusion that there's a group of staff there that have been to a podium, that have had success, both as players and as members of staff. So I think I'm quite lucky in that sense. I have a really good feel for what's there. I have a really good feel what I think I need. And so, I think that's a real benefit, really.
You've worked with some great coaches, head coaches over the years, including John Herdman for many years, and with Kenneth Heinemuller, the person that you're succeeding in this role. But this is your first senior women's head coaching position. You've talked a little bit there about how you've grown and how you've evolved over the last couple of years. How have these experiences prepared you for this role as the women's national team head coach?
Yeah, I think, you've touched on there, working under some great coaches, and you see the highs and you see the lows. You learn from the big moments, you learn from the low moments. And I've had the best seat in the house to do that with 3, what I feel are world-class coaches. I think, you talk about first senior women's head coaching position. When I left Canada, and went to England, my big sort of thought process was I want to do one thing and do it well. And I guess the benefit I've had over the last 2 to 3 years is I've just been a senior coach, albeit assistant coach. But I think the capacity in which Phil used me was very much, I was elevated. I was, operating at a certain level. And I think working under coaches and seeing them experiences, as well as just being a senior coach, I think is really equip me, and I feel ready for this position.
You spent 2 years or about 2 years back in England working for the FA alongside Phil Neville, who was the head coach of the women's national team there. What did you take away from that experience that you feel will help you in your role as Canada's women's national team head coach?
Yeah, I think, obviously we had some success. We fell short just at the World Cup. I think, again, the highs, the lows, you learn from every moment. I think the big sort of difference probably in the role that I've been in is the size of the organisation, the size of the support staff, and managing that and understanding what's needed. And sometimes that isn't always a great thing, Jason. I think what you learn is that sometimes simplifying is a good thing. But I also learned the role in on camp and off camp. So if you look at the domestic game here, it's really taken off. We've obviously got some Canadians in this league, but the role that I guess club football has in a player's career, and that essentially however many days you get them for national team camps, the modern women's game, you need more than that, and you have to support, watch, help develop players in their own environment. I think that's definitely been a big factor. And I think, I'm not sure we missed any games really throughout the whole season. And a big part of the role was watching, supporting, feeding back, connecting with players. And I think you look at the times we're in COVID, I mean, that's a big part of a head coach's job at the moment, is to connect with a player remotely, albeit remotely in some ways. But I think, the domestic game, the scope of working for such a big organisation, and I think looking and understanding even more what it takes to win, success in Canada with the bronze medal. I was part of that team, back-to-back bronze. I mean, that's a massive, massive achievement. And then you look at the She Believes Cup, the momentum in the World Cup. I think they're all sort of, you put all those experiences together. You can't really pinpoint any, but you put all that together, and I think it starts to formulate in your mind as to the little things that you take and you say, you know what, I like that. I've learned this, and you bring it together to move towards your own philosophy and what you believe it takes to win.
When you joined Canada Soccer back in 2013, I believe it was, John Herdman was the women's national team head coach and Excel director. You've worked closely with John for many years, and shortly before you joined the FA, he transitioned to the role of men's national team head coach and Excel director. How will the strength of your relationship with John benefit both the women's and the men's national team programs?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. I think, you know, myself and John, we go back even before Canada Soccer and New Zealand football days. And I think when you have something that's really strong, like you built on strong foundations in terms of alignment, and you know, John's been there, he's worked with this group of players, or certainly a core group of this players, and has brought success to the program. So I think I'd be naive to come in and ignore that, whilst bringing my own experiences and starting to, I guess, paint my own vision. But I do think the sort of alignment across what the structures look like within the country, I think those can certainly have really good synergies. And I think that relationship that's got good foundations, that'll be really useful when you're looking at sort of trying to align certain areas of a program. But I'm also clear that I guess the men's needs, the women's needs might look different, and you know, being okay with that too.
You mentioned there that your role with the FA was working with senior players, and much of your previous role with Canada Soccer revolved around developing young players. How will that experience of working in both environments help you in your role as the women's national team head coach? And are there specific players that you've maybe kept your eye on over the last couple of years that you worked with at the youth level that you've targeted as being ready to maybe make the step up to the senior team?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is going to help. I think, you know, even the role I'm just finishing in, you know, the women's game now is at that point where you look at it every quadrennial, you start to, you know, immerse new young players into a team, and this team is no different. It's got a lot of youth players that have had some great experiences through their youth days. But the blend of experience and youth will be crucial. You can't you only have to look at Rio. You know, that was a perfect blend, I felt, of youth and senior experience. But I think even understanding the different generations and what young players might need compared to senior players, I think my experiences recently will help equip me to the senior side. But absolutely my sort of 8-year period of working with youth players at a national team level to World Cups, etc., seeing the highs, seeing the lows, understanding what they might need and feel. I think that's only going to help hopefully transition young players who might not have, you know, a massive amount of caps and experience, but they might have a lot of talent, and how you bring certain values and experiences from the senior players to help evolve into a culture that is there to win. You know, the hunger that young players have, and sometimes the naivety, it is a good thing because it helps push the team forward to a new level.
Yeah, they don't know what they don't know, and they're not nervous because of it. It kind of helps a little bit. But I think you touched on something really important there, Bev, that you got to get that balance right. You rarely win with a team full of just senior players and no young players coming through, and it's really about getting that balance right. You know, in your role with the FA, I'm certain you would have kept a close eye on the performance of Canada's women's national team. How do you see building on the team's performance with this talented group of players that you'll be working with?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I have kept a close eye on Canada. I think it's probably for me the big question, and questions I'll be asking to the players really is like getting back to what is our X factor, what's our identity. I have my own opinion, but I think for the players in there, you know, making sure we've got the right pegs in the right holes, and really simplifying, I think, over the next 9 months, what it is that we're going after and what we're going to sort of measure as key performance indicators to say, listen, we're playing the way we want to play, and these things will hopefully lead to success. So I think the simplification for me is crucial. The identity, so you can feel it, you can smell it, you can see it. I think getting that really crystal clear from the start, and I have my own ideas of what I feel I would like to bring and how I would like to play, but I've got to blend that with the experiences that this group's had, and getting the best out of the group of players in front of me.
We now have so many players playing in top level professional environments around the world, either in Europe or in the NWSL. How important do you feel those professional playing environments are to the development of our women's national team program? And what role does the NWSL specifically play in that development?
Yeah, great question. And I do think, Jason, this is where I guess the women's game is going. You've seen a massive shift in professional football or soccer, as I'll say in Canada. And I think ultimately, you week in, week out, a player in a professional environment, you're doing what it takes to win. And I think that is a massive jigsaw piece in any player's development, young or old. I've learned that more and more. I think, like I've touched on before, the amount of days that you have as a women's national team is limited. Of course, as coaches, you want it to be more, but you absolutely need that week in, week out competition training environment where you've got world-class players. You look NWSL, you look WSL as an example. They're training, every day with some of the best players in the world. So that can only help. And then you look at the NWSL specifically. I watch the recent series, and you can't predict what the score is going to be. And that competitive nature that you see in that league specifically, you don't get big blowout scores. It's ultra competitive. Again, that's players learning to win and doing whatever it takes to win. And ultimately, that's where this group want to be.
It's that daily training environment, isn't it, that just pushes you to be your very best. And it's one of the things that I feel is lacking sometimes when you look at transitioning from youth football to the professional game at the senior level. If you look below the professional level of the game, certainly in Canada, what role do you see senior amateur or semi-professional soccer playing moving forward on the women's side? Is that a stepping stone, do you feel, from youth soccer to the professional game or to a top NCAA or Canadian university program? Is that a part of the development process for our top players?
Yeah, I think it absolutely can be, Jason. I think that the big thing that comes to my mind is how it aligns, because I think the system, the pathway, it needs to obviously align towards that player's development. But absolutely, I guess being here in England, it's a totally different experience for a youth player. You've got 16, 17, 18-year-olds, at some of the best clubs in the country, experienced in professional environments where it's not always easy. And I think that's what you get with professional soccer. So absolutely, I think what I'm clear on in the remit I've sort of been given is obviously the top end in terms of the senior environment, and how I guess more the professional leagues around the world are going to help us, and having players or more players in those environments will help this team win.
Aside from the rigors of the working situation and the jobs that you're doing, we're also dealing with a global pandemic right now. But we're seeing a long overdue awareness of key social issues like inclusivity and equality. What role do players and coaches play in raising awareness of these issues? And how important is it for their voices to be heard and acknowledged and amplified?
Yeah, great question. And I think you're absolutely right there. I think as a coach in an environment, our job really is to provide more of a safe, positive space where players do feel they can express themselves on any issues that they feel strongly about. And I think providing that sort of setting where people can be themselves, they can feel comfortable enough to speak up and for what they believe in. I think that's my job as a coach, and to support them in that process.
In the short term, I just want to talk about your setup and your home base. You're based in England right now. That's where you're currently living. What are your plans in the short term with respect to relocating to Canada, and where do you intend to be based out of?
Yeah, so obviously in the current pandemic, our plans really are probably to remain in England. The plans are fluid, but up until the first quarter, so February time probably, to relocate back to Canada. My little boy was born in Canada, got married in Canada, so it does feel like we're returning home. And we'll be based out of Vancouver. So short term, it'll be probably a lot of connecting with players. The benefit is I'm down the road from many of the Canadian players who are playing here in the English League. You've got obviously those in France. So there's some benefit there of being based in Europe short term, but definitely intend to be out in Canada at the first quarter of next year.
We're getting snow in some parts of the country right now, Bev. You sure you don't want to relocate to somewhere colder than Vancouver?
No, Vancouver. I'm very happy living in Vancouver. I've missed that place.
I think many people would be, for sure. Last question for you. The Olympics are on the horizon, and that has to be the immediate priority for sure. What's the long-term focus, though, beyond the Olympics? What does the future hold for this group of players?
Yeah, I think you look at the short term and you go, it's an 18-player roster. So it's been really crystal clear on what the makeup of that roster needs to be. How do we need to play in that sort of setting? But I think the longer term is staying up to date with, I guess, the women's trends and where the women's game is going. I think also looking beyond, there's a group of experienced players who, again, I've got to have these conversations, but over the next sort of year, 2 years, 3 years, might look to move towards the end of their careers. That's for those to decide. But I guess for me to plan beyond those players, we've got a massive amount of caps and experience. And to be fair, a group of players who are still performing at the top of their game. But eventually those players will retire. And I think it's making sure now that the players just below them who may be young, who maybe need some more experiences and caps and confidence beyond that Olympics, starting to shift those so that they are peaking and ready for 2023 and 2024. I think that's a real sort of focus beyond that Olympic Games. But short term, that Olympics is to get on that podium and hopefully change the colour of the medal.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm very much looking forward to that. Bev, look, I'm sure I speak on behalf of all Canadians. It's great to have you back home with Canada Soccer. And I'm very excited to work with you again. I have nothing but fond memories of our time spent grafting away at the Olympics in Rio and the celebrations that ensued afterwards. I still think back to the first game against Australia when you and I were sprinting through the bowels of the stadium to get up to our perch at the top, and then we got to the top and we realized that we'd scored, and we just couldn't believe what had happened. So it was it's great to have you back, and I really look forward to working with you again. Best of luck in your new role, and we'll look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks a lot, Jason. Good to talk.
Excellent. Bev Priestman, the new women's national team head coach for Canada Soccer. When we come back after the break, Brad Fougere and I will wrap up today's episode, and we'll talk about what's coming up in the weeks ahead. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. I'm Jason DeVos, Director of Development with Canada Soccer, joined by Brad Fougere, Digital and Corporate Communications Manager with Canada Soccer. Brad, let's start with the conversation with Dave Nutt, Manager of Development Operations with Canada Soccer and club licensing. What's the big takeaway for you? You've been heavily involved, obviously, in the communication of club licensing across the country. What's the big takeaway for you right now with that program?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's an exciting time. Obviously, Dave mentioned that we will have Quebec Soccer Federation clubs to announce by the end of the year. So we're looking forward to that announcement, and the idea that this club licensing program and the number of clubs participating in it will be over 150, I think, is a testament to the work of your team, of Dave specifically, but most importantly of the clubs themselves. No one knows better than you and Dave the rigorous process of sort of review and submission and review and resubmission and staying on top of all of the expectations that exist in the club licensing program. It's about time. I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks that, and it's a very unique program. And I, Dave talked about it a little bit there. Some of the things that we're asking people to take a look at aren't things that people have had to take a look at or have some forethought about, previously, giving some people the benefit of the doubt. But obviously we had a recent announcement come out of Quebec. They've moved to a contemporary governance model with some reforms there that are exciting for the future of the game. And you talked about it with Dave. The same level of thinking needs to happen at the very bottom of the grassroots of the game as well.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece to talk about, is the alignment of the entire system. And it ties in nicely to the conversation with Bev Priestman about ensuring that we have the best environments possible for players to develop in. And that starts at the grassroots level with club licensing. It starts with the introduction of skill center programs, dedicated player programs for U8 to U12, and ensuring that we're giving kids the optimal learning environment where they can fall in love with the game. And that's going to happen through helping the clubs get better at delivering their programs. And that's really what club licensing is all about. It's not about separating the good from the bad. It's about helping every organization be the best version of itself. And Dave does a very good job of playing that role of the critical friend that holds the mirror up to the club to show them what they really are, and then stands alongside them and helps them to get better at what they do. And I think that does tie in nicely to the conversation at the other end of the spectrum, which is at the highest level, the senior women's national team. Bev Priestman obviously returning to Canada Soccer after a 2-year stint with the English FA, working under Phil Neville as the assistant head coach there. What was your key takeaway from the chat with Bev?
It's great to have her back. It's refreshing to hear her voice again, speaking about Canadian soccer, not English soccer. But there's a lot of similarities between she and John Herdman in her mannerisms and the way that she talks about the game, and seemingly in her remit. I mean, you spoke to her a bit about her focus. Her focus is very much going to be on the senior national team as the head coach of that senior national team program. But you both spoke about sort of the need for alignment and the need to, ensure that players that are in that national team pool or in that national team bubble are playing in the best environments. And certainly if we think about the work that John Herdman and his staff have been doing to sort of get their hands dirty in some of the development environments where men's national team players are working, and the relationships that he's built with the pro clubs where men's national team players or future and aspiring bubble men's national team players are. I think there's some really interesting and exciting alignment in a school of thought in supporting those players, in supporting them in their club environments, and ensuring that those club environments are putting them through what it is that the expectations are, both for their development, at the club level, but also for the national team, which is, obviously different on the women's side than it is on the men's side. But with Bev there in England, as she mentioned that she is, she'll have an opportunity, and probably has had the opportunity to sort of get in there and get her hands dirty with some of those clubs, and build the relationships that are going to be required in order to, I don't want to say keep tabs on the players that are in those programs, but definitely understand on a day in and day out basis what they're being challenged with.
Yeah, obviously the working relationship with John and the men's program, I think is a key component for sure. But what really struck me about the conversation with Bev was that she's very much her own person and has grown and evolved in the 2 years that she left Canada Soccer to join the English FA. I think that's a sign of real growth and development, is that willingness to go out and focus on one thing. I think she said she wanted to focus on being great at one thing, and that one thing was being the assistant coach, and that prepared her for this type of an opportunity, which I think is really it's really refreshing. We often stress that in coach education, that you have to be very determined and open-minded and willing to put yourself into an uncomfortable situation to grow and develop and to become your own person. And I think that's a really important piece. So that, the working relationship there is going to be, very important, I'm sure. One of the things I think is also worth reiterating is the importance of having a woman leading the women's program as head coach, and having Bev in that role as a role model and as a spokesperson for women in the sport. We're starting to see, and we've certainly profiled on this podcast, many of the strong, intelligent women working in the game at the grassroots level. And we're seeing that percolate upwards to the coaching ranks. And we're seeing more and more females applying for advanced coaching licenses in Canada, which is a testament to the fact that they have role models that they can look up to and see. People like Karina LeBlanc, who is a great role model for women around the world, but specifically for Canadian girls. One of the other things I wanted to touch on with respect to the conversation with Bev was the relationship between the young players that she worked with in her 5-year stint with Canada Soccer and who we're now seeing graduating to the senior team. I think that's going to be an important component of transition and ongoing success. Brad, there's a long list of young players that Bev worked with over the years who are now starting to sort of push towards that senior team place, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, more than just push towards a senior place. I mean, there's many players who are in the senior national team at this point. You think of Julia Grasso, Jordan Heidema, Gabby Carroll, a number of players, even beyond that, Jade Riviere, Jade Rose. I mean, the list goes on and on of players who were in the youth national team setup while Bev was, in charge of that sort of youth U17 to U20 national team setup. So it is definitely an interesting time. I mean, she mentioned it, you mentioned it, and everyone knows it. We've got a group of senior national team players on the women's side who have been with the program for a very long time, who have more experience than you could even imagine, and a young core of players. And while some may be surprised to hear that Bev will be in charge of the women's national team and just the women's national team, she certainly has the relationships with the players who will be coming up and will be expected to play more prominent roles, not just in the future, but at this upcoming Olympics.
That's exciting times. And like I said, when she was on the call, I'm excited to work with Bev again. I had great memories of our time spent over the years working in the women's national team program, and looking forward to seeing what she's going to bring to help build on the previous success of the program and the work that Kenneth Heinemuller and John Herman have done before her, and carry on that success. So exciting times. Looking ahead, the next couple of weeks, Brad, what's on the horizon for Canada Soccer?
Yeah, we touched on lots of domestic activity and lots on the women's side in anticipation of Bev joining us. On the men's side, there's a few more things to mention. We've got Europa League action upcoming and Champions League action. Obviously, we're all aware of the perils of Alphonso Davies' ankle turn, some ligament damage there, and he'll be out 6 to 8 weeks. So unfortunately won't be in the UEFA Champions League lineup for Bayern upcoming. But Mandrakar James has a match upcoming and is still in Champions League play. So that's exciting for Mandrakar. And yeah, obviously we talked about it off the hop, but I'll have my eyes on the CONCACAF League matchup between Forge and Tower FC coming up Tuesday.
Yeah, lots to look forward to on the domestic and international front, and tracking players from coast to coast. As always, thanks for joining us, listeners, and stay safe. Look after each other. Be well. Take care of each other and yourselves and your family, and we'll connect again soon. See you then.